Welcome to the Why on Earth Community Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron William Perry, and today we're visiting with the founder of Engineers Without Borders, Bernard Amadei. Hey, Bernard.
Hey, how are you, Aaron?
I'm doing great, and really looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too. I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I do too. Dr. Bernard Amadei is a distinguished professor and professor of civil engineering at the University of Colorado at Boulder. He received his PhD in 1982 from the University of California at Berkeley. Dr. Amadei is the founding director of the Mortensen Center in Engineering for Developing Communities. He is also the founding president of Engineers Without Borders USA and the co-founder of the Engineers Without Borders International Network. Among other distinctions, and the list is long, I've got several pages here.
No, you don't have to go through all of that. No.
Dr. Amadei is an elected member of the U.S. National Academy of Engineering and the National Academy of Construction. He is also an elected senior Ashoka Fellow. Dr. Amadei holds 7 honorary doctoral degrees from UMass Lowell, Carroll College, Clarkson Drexel, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, the Technion in Israel, and SUNY ESF. In 2013 and 2014, Dr. Amadei served as a science envoy to Pakistan and Nepal for the United States Department of State. And he also holds a commercial pilot license. Maybe we'll talk about that too at some point, Bernard. But what has struck me in learning a bit more about you and your background from a professional and academic standpoint, and having been aware of your work with Engineers Without Borders for many years now, is that we're not only going to be talking about technical and linear, so to speak, items today. We're going to actually be talking a lot about holistic, interconnected, and even one might say spiritual topics.
Absolutely. I mean, Aaron, good point. I tell everyone, if all the problems in the world were technical, we would have solved them by now. Yeah. I think we know how to do it from a technical point of view. I think what we are lacking is really the more inner dimension of human beings. How do we essentially address the global issues that we are facing today? Not with new tech, new AI, new whatever. I think that it has to do with the inner work of our institutions, the inner work of decision makers. There's a great quote from a mystic of Meister Eckhart of the 13th century, I guess, who I'm going to paraphrase, who say that essentially the outer work cannot be great if the inner work is small. And so the question is, what's the inner work of our institutions today, looking at what they do from an external point of view? And I can really question about the lack of inner work, right? So for us engineers and scientists, usually it's coming up with some new theories and new technology and whatever. That's probably the last thing we need on our planet today. It's more how do we create more of an inner work that translates into a better planet.
Yeah. Well, and obviously right now, so many people are focused on the development of technology, whether it's in the digital realm or other types of applied or appropriate energy technologies or whatever else is being deployed around the world right now. And I'm wondering, it doesn't seem from my perspective that the inner work is a part of that milieu for most folks engaged in that kind of work. And I'm wondering, Bernard, from your perspective, how might we look to bring that inner work more into the mainstream and more into the fore of the consciousness of folks in a very technical society?
Well, that's a good remark and a really good question. I don't really have an answer to that question, but look at the educational system that we are all exposed to, starting, say, at the age of 6 all the way to 18. We don't talk about inner work at all. We don't talk, it's not part of the discussion. It's about doing this, doing that, getting a good job, making good money, or whatever you do, helping the economy, whatever you. But what about the inner dimension of the decision makers. And where do you learn that? I think that what we need are wisdom schools almost, where wisdom is part of the education. Somewhere it's easier to speak a foreign language when you learn it early on in life. Well, what about teaching young kids about wisdom, about the inner dimension? I'm not talking about religion here. We're talking about rediscovering what we are as human beings. Introducing sustainability as early as possible. Introducing healthy mind, healthy body as early as possible. So it should be part of, my opinion, should be part of the education. And it's likely that, like a foreign language, essentially the kids, we will remember that as we move into teenage years and adulthood. Of course we make mistakes, that's part of the equation. But being able to get back in-house. I mean, an analogy that crosses my mind is that I read somewhere that in the old days, people in Midwest would go out during the hurricane season or tornado season. The farmers would attach themselves with a rope to the house, so in case they were stuck out there, they could go back home. So I like that metaphor, because what is that rope that we have when we deal with, especially with complex issues in life? We all deal with that. What is that rope that brings us back home? Because home is where we want to be. We want to be in a safe place, and whatever that safe place is certainly different for you and me. But what is it that we have that brings us back home?
Oh, wow.
What is that they call it the life-saving rope that brings you back home when poop hits the fan? You're in the middle of it, you cannot control it, and the fan is spinning faster and faster. How do you go back home?
Yeah. It seems to me that, and this is obviously a big part of the work that we're doing at the Y on Earth community, that community building and having those connections, those human connections, while we're also cultivating our own inner lives, inner dimensions, is necessary. Maybe there are some other things as well, but it seems like those two, community and the cultivation of the inner experience, is critical.
Absolutely. Right? The term community comes from the Latin. I read about it, and says it's about the gift of being together.
Yeah.
So you can be together with a group of people. If it's not a gift, don't stay there. It's not a community, right?
Yeah.
And we are talking about education in general. Universities were created 1,000 years ago, give or take, for young people to find a place in the universe.
Yeah.
Is that the mission of our universities today? It is not.
Right.
Finding your place in the universe, mostly at the time young men. But today, where do you find your place in the universe today? You probably don't. I've been at the university for 40 years teaching. I'm almost done here at the end of this semester. I don't think that the mission of the University of Colorado is to find, for young people to find our place in the universe. Not just University of Colorado, of course, but other universities. So what's that mission? I mean, to me, the university should be a place where you discover yourself. We talked about it before, but this idea of, I ask my students usually that question: what's your mission statement? What's the gift that you only can give to the rest of the world? And are you a loose cannonball in the ocean of life, moving around left and right there? Or do you have, your gift? Of course, that the answer at what is your gift may change over time as you grow up and discover essentially who you are. But to me, it's an important question. What's your mission statement? I reflected a lot on that. Initially, my mission statement was long, and just summarize it with one word, 3 words. I mean, to be of service. 4 words, actually. To be of service. That's it. So, I think finding your mission statement, your gift, is should be an outcome of any form of education.
That's so beautiful. And
so at the end of high school,
yeah.
we ask you that last homework assignment. Okay, start all over again. At the end of 4 years of college, okay, what do you think? Are you better off today? Do you know who you are? And the answer may be no, which is perfectly fine too. It takes a lifetime, for some people many lifetimes, to find out who they are. But what's your mission statement? What's your gift that you only can give to the rest of the planet?
Yeah, so important and really beautiful to engage in that inquiry. And I'm curious, we were talking recently about the fact that the university, as originally conceived many, many centuries ago, was conceived by mystics. You sort of just alluded to this a few minutes ago. And I'm curious, in your opinion, what was it that was going on in the 11th, the 12th, the 13th centuries in Europe as that connection with the Middle East had come alive again? And there was something so special in those times that it seems got really quite confused and jumbled in the ensuing centuries. Share with us a little, because I know this is something you've been exploring a lot.
I'm really interested about the mystics of 11th, 12th, 13th century there. And it's my a mentor, Matthew Fox, who has written, 30, 40 books, essentially on the mystics. And my life changed completely when I met him in the late 1990s. And really discovering a bunch of individuals, men and women, talking Meister Eckhart, St. Francis of Assisi, Hildegard of Bingen, Julian of Norwich, and all those individual, all those eclectic people, Thomas Aquinas and so on. They were just rediscovering this concept of awe, and to me, the wow, I call it the wow factor. It was at that time, and Matthew Fox has a beautiful book on it, on original blessing instead of original sin. Wow! Wow! Of course, you don't bring too many people to church on Sunday with that marketing tagline, but original blessing. It's such a positive way of looking at how we stand as human beings in the universe, right? And that lasted about 200-300 years, and then actually the plague came, stopped the whole thing, pretty much.
Yeah.
This concept of original blessing, and after that was, as you know today, sin and guilt and all that nonsense that you see in the world. But rediscovering this concept of the wow factor, right? To me, good engineering is an engineering where you can look at it and say, wow. If you look at any practices, if the practice you do, not just engineering, does not give you a sense of wow, of awe and wonder. And I think that what the mystics essentially helped us to rediscover is this concept of awe and wonder. Awe, being in awe and wondering about creation, right? Creation, not just in 7 days. I always laugh about the 7 days of creation. I've been focusing over the past 20 years on system thinking and so on. Okay, you hear from Genesis, on the first day, God did that. The second day, God did that. Third day, based on the Bible, God is a linear thinker. Really, when you look at, I think that science of the past 20 years or 50 years, it's discovering that the universe is not a great machine, it's a great thought. That the universe is beautiful, that its systems are everywhere. So I have a disconnect between how God is described as a linear thinker in the Bible, in Genesis, and at the same time say, yeah, God created everything, which is a system of systems and so on. So just a disconnect there between the two, but it is the way it is. But this idea of, the mystics really changed my life. I'm so grateful to Matthew Fox and a few others for bringing essentially Christian mystics, but then you also have the Muslim and Sufi mystics also, who essentially this idea of rediscovering love. I mean, love, the beloved, and the divine as a lover, right? I mean, where you have an intimate relationship with the divine. And wow, wow. Again, I say why. Again, because it sounds beautiful. If your mystical tradition that you follow or spiritual tradition does not bring you in awe and wonder with creation and the universe, then you may want to decide to switch to a different tradition.
Yeah.
This idea of sin and guilt and so on, even sin, concept of sin, the mistranslation, sin comes from the Greek, it means to miss the mark. Words that have been used like redemption, repent, right? In Aramaic, it's metanoia, change your mind. John the Baptist was asking us to change our mind, not to repent and feel guilty and sinful and all that stuff. So, it's rediscovering that stuff that, wow, again, it's a wow factor that to me is so critical. And so the question of fine, discover that wow factor. How do you bring it into practice? How do you live with that wow factor on a daily basis? With your family, your friends, your work? How do you bring it into practice, the action part? So contemplation on one side, wow. Action on the other side. So how does contemplation translate into action?
Beautiful. These are such beautiful inquiries. I have to admit that in my book, Why on Earth, there's a chapter called Wonder that is all about this experience of awe and cultivating this experience of awe and deepening in our awareness, our understanding of just how important this experience is to our humanity, to our humanness.
Exactly.
And I'm really curious your thoughts on how we bring more of that into the mainstream. Maybe I'm reiterating my earlier question in a sense, but I wonder about this quite a bit. How do we reintroduce, especially in the secular academic context, where sort of all things is spiritual? And I give talks all around the country and internationally, sometimes in secular academic settings and sometimes in faith communities. And it's interesting, the language, the code switching, the different rules, so to speak, of what's permissible and what's not in these different communities. And I really wonder, how do we do more of this in the mainstream academic world?
Oh, that's a good question. I've been wondering about that for the past 40 years. And in fact, my next book is a title is called Engineering with Soul, S-O-U-L. Love, soul, these are four-letter words that you never hear on campus. We hear other four-letter words, but not those. So, in fact, I remember bringing the concept of love into a class on sustainability, and whoa. At the end of the semester, in fact, cosmology, I remember saying, okay, I was teaching sustainability to engineers, and the first 2-3 weeks was the cosmology, rediscovering this concept of awe and wonder, and I used the book of Thomas Berry and Brian Swim, The Universe Story. And I asked the students to read the universe story as they were reading fiction. And because it's a great story, and how do we read, talking about wow factor, the wow of essentially the universe story. Whoa. 13.8 billion years, essentially. Whoa, everything, each time I eat something, I'm thankful for it took 13.8 billion years. Yesterday I had rice, and I was looking at those grains of rice. It took 13.8 billion years for those grains of rice to be in my mouth.
Yeah.
It's not shabby, not bad. So again, I think you can rediscover this concept of wow in a grain of rice, in a flower, in your partner, in the visage of your partner, in your children, in your family, everywhere, and it's everywhere. So to me, I really believe that miracles are not an exceptions. They are the rules. In fact, what we call miracles, because, oh my God, something is happening good because we were not expecting it. Well, it says something about us, right? When you turn the whole thing around and say, well, you're a miracle, I'm a miracle, my son is a miracle, my daughter is a miracle, the cat is a miracle, everything is a miracle. But again, we're discovering that, whoa, you know, how many, trillions of cells are right now in your body? Essentially, you know, each one doing, 10,000 chemical interactions with every second, right?
Yeah.
How can you not say, wow,
Yeah.
in something like that? So it's rediscovering this concept of awe and wonder in everything we do.
I love it. It reminds me of, I think, wasn't it Einstein who said that you either experience life as if nothing was a miracle or as if everything was a miracle?
I fully agree with him there. I think that everything is a miracle.
Yeah.
In fact, it's the rule rather than the exception.
Yeah.
But then your question is, well, where do you learn that stuff? I mean, not at the university, I can tell you that. In fact, the university is going to do the opposite. It's going to, and that's based on what Descartes and Newton told us about 300 years ago. Essentially, matters of the mind and matters of the soul are essentially completely separate. That's bullshit, excuse me the term, right? Completely, I think we are rediscovering that the two are interacting, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, academia is a very, to me, I mean, I'm glad I'm finishing my 40 years of academic career because I cannot take it anymore. I mean, to me, in fact, I always joke that we should have I should create AA, Academic Anonymous, where, you know, you say, what's the 12-step program so that we can remove the academic nonsense out of an academician, right? Academic Anonymous. That would be an interesting program. But, you know, no, there's no soul. There's no soul on campus. That's the way I look at it. You walk around. I mean, God, you see so many miserable people out there, you know. And on the academic world, don't get me there because I'm coming out of it with a lot of bitterness rather than. But at the same time, I need to change my mind, right? I can look at it and say, okay, fine. 40 years of experience. I've learned some stuff. So what am I going to do with when I grow up now? Okay. So,
yeah. Well, I'll come to that question. What's next? But before going there, I want to acknowledge that notwithstanding some of the critique you're offering right now of the academic world, you've also had such a tremendous influence in it, and especially on the discipline of engineering around the country and worldwide. And when you created Engineers Without Borders, about 20 years ago, is it?
Give or take, yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to hear what caused you to create that in the first place, and also, please tell us about now how many thousands of folks are involved here in the United States and many more thousands worldwide. Can you give us an idea of what the organization looks like today? But first, tell us about how it got started.
How it got started was really here, actually, in this house. And in 1997, we needed some landscaping done in the backyard, and I picked up a landscaping company from Longmont out of the phone book, the Yellow Pages. You have to be careful about
what are Yellow Pages?
Well,
no, just kidding.
You don't even remember the Yellow Pages. Well, they were Yellow Pages at one time in the history of mankind, and so I selected a company at random. You have to be careful about random processes because they can change your life. Yeah. And then 3 people came a few days later. They were all from Belize, and all 3 of them were working in that company in Longmont, and they told me about the needs of Mayan Indians, and they told me, why don't you come over and help us? So 2 years went by, 1999, when I got an email from one of them and say, hey, we were in your backyard a couple of years ago. You mentioned you could help us, and in developing a curriculum for young Mayan kids in technology and STEM. And then so I said yes. So I went over there and visited a bunch of Mayan villages, including the village of San Pablo, and came across essentially the village, really poor, and when it really struck me. This idea of being of assistance to others was not new to me. I had done volunteer work and at the Boulder Shelter for the homeless. So I think being of service to others has always been part of my DNA. But I think that that trip to Belize was kind of a convergence of two things: being of service on one side and engineering on the other side.
Yeah.
So it was a very singular point in my life, let's put it that way. So I mentioned that to the students at CU. I was teaching a class on engineering geology, and the students said, well, we want to be part of it. We want to be part of it. So 10, 15 students signed up. We had a technician who came also, and we went over there collecting data, and the students were super excited about the project. It was a water project. Failed 3 times actually, until different solutions came up. But essentially, when I asked the students why you're so excited about it, and they say, well, we want more meaningful engineering education. And that concept of meaningful is something that really struck me. I said, how come you take those classes, they should be meaningful to you? And say, no. We're tired of doing those problems at the end of chapter 5, and I'm tired of grading them anyway. And then so that was essentially the birth of Ingénieurs Without Borders. It was driven by the students. The students wanted to do something different, learn engineering in the field rather than in books. And then so Ingénieurs Without Borders exploded, and it was not, startups. For the people who are watching this program and who have done startups, they know quite well, and you know quite well too. Iran, doing a startup is not easy.
Right.
Most people essentially, 10% of startups essentially make across the big valley of death there, essentially it's called. But you keep on going, and that's the beauty about America, is that here you can keep failing. It's okay, keep on going. In fact, I don't talk about failing anymore. I talk about learning lessons. You don't fail, you learn lessons.
Yep.
Or you succeed.
Absolutely, I've got a few of those under my belt.
You know quite well, but it's painful. It's not an an easy journey.
No.
But the students were always there to remind me of that the journey was worth continuing.
Yeah.
And so now we have about 17,000 members in the United States. I would say half and half students, half professionals. The students become professionals and they stay in the organization. The headquarters are in Denver. I don't run the organization anymore. I'm just one voice on the board. But we have helped 2.5 million, 3 million people in the world. Working in 48 different countries. That was before COVID. We cut down after COVID, now trying to get back on the saddle. But this idea to be of service. And I look at it and I say, whoa, why is it that those students were so excited about being of service to others? There was nothing for them to do. If they wanted to be of service, you build a concrete canoe or you build something like that. But the idea of learning engineering by going to the field, by talking to some real people, providing essentially clean water to people. Whoa. It's amazing we're providing basic electricity to people. You should see how people just provide one light bulb. Like right now in this room we have, 20 light bulbs or whatever, but just to have one light bulb.
Yeah.
And I remember those faces in Afghanistan in Kabul, when they brought light to electricity to Kabul, where there was not a lot of electricity, but the kids would go under the street lights and do their homework assignments at night. Wow. Desperate to learn something, right? I don't see too many high school kids and students at CU doing homework assignments like that. But there was something really special in bringing. There's something special in bringing essentially water, clean water, electricity, to food, to communities around the world, and that's what I want to do more when I grow up. When I'm going to retire at the end of this semester, what am I going to do? I mean, I usually tell people TBD, right? To be determined, but certainly to be of service. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
I think that being of service to me is, if you remove that, then I die. I mean, I really need to make it part of my DNA.
Yep.
You pay me to be of service, fine. You don't pay me to be of service, fine too. So the money is not key at all.
Yeah.
Of course, it's nice to get your airline ticket paid, but just to be of service, I think in itself, it's to bring your soul into. Again, engineering with soul. I think to me, Engineers Without Borders is a good way of expressing that concept where you bring the mind, body, soul into your work, right? Into helping a human being there who now has clean water, has a little bit of hope, creating essentially small businesses. I like the term doing well by doing good, right? I mean, often you have people, the do-good people, the do-well people. I think the challenge is to be in the middle there, doing well by doing good. Yeah. Then it's an interesting journey. It's no longer a job. It's Matthew Fox and Thomas Berry talk about the great work. What's your work? Not your job. Yeah. What's your work that keeps you going? Yeah. Right? Where you wake up in the morning and say, wow, what am I going to do with my day? How am I going to improve the world? How am I going to improve myself, my family, and so on? That's work. Great work. Right? It's a beautiful book to read, The Great Work. Compare your 9 to 5 p.m. job there. 2 hours of driving in the morning, 2 hours of driving at night. Okay. Some people have to do that, I guess. Yeah. But what's your great work? Right?
Yeah, so wonderful to reflect on that, another inquiry. I want to ask, just to round out my ability to write a synopsis of our discussion together. You mentioned 17,000 members in the United States. Do you know how many are involved in the global network of Engineers Without Borders?
No, because there are about 80 different Engineers Without Borders groups around the world. I did not create all of them. I've helped create actually some of them. But the idea is to create a network of young people and also senior people, professionals who can be of service to humanity in different countries around the world. There are about 80 groups. If you look at Engineers Without Borders International, you have a list there of all the different groups. Some of them are students only, some of them are professionals only. Like in our case, we are both. You can do students and professionals. The professional chapters tend to take bigger projects. It could be a bridge construction, for instance, or a dam or something. Student chapters could be a rainwater catchment system, electrical system, sanitation system, something usually smaller.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting and that's helpful. While we're talking about some of those technological solutions and infrastructure, let me ask you this: notwithstanding some of the concerns and critiques we might have and share regarding some of the technologies being developed right now, what is there a technology or a family of technologies that are making significant advances right now that most excite you in terms of the well-being of humanity worldwide?
I don't think it's the technology itself. It's what you do with it, right? But, I've been really interested over the past few years in the field of relationship between engineering and peace.
Yeah.
And there's a group in Washington, D.C. called Peace Tech. Peace Tech Lab that was created by a good friend of mine, Sheldon Himmelfarb. you can go peacetechlab.org, I guess, and you'll see that what's the role of technology in bringing peace into the world, right? Technology can do, it's not the technology itself, it can divide people or it can bring people together, right?
Yeah.
So Peace Tech Lab is to look at using technology for the betterment of mankind, right? A vision we have, and the vision that I talk about a lot is this concept of peace industrial complex. Can we create a peace industrial complex in the world that essentially competes with the war industrial complex that was created pretty much 100 years ago? Yeah. Imagine, I would imagine people who contribute to the war industrial complex. I don't think that those people are mean. No. They don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to kill people. Yeah. But they make money.
Yeah.
So imagine, can we create a peace industrial complex where people make more money in contributing to peace than in contributing to war? And the answer, it's a no-brainer.
Right.
You have 8 billion customers every day.
Right.
8 billion customers who need clean water, they need food, they need transportation, they need communication, they need health, access to health, and what have you there. If you look at water filtration system, show me water filtration system today that is affordable, reliable, that doesn't break down essentially after 2 days or 1 week or so on, and that can be essentially scaled at the global level. We don't have that. You find systems that are about $20, $50. Well, you and I can go to REI and buy a system there that gives us clean water whatsoever. That's not sustainable. Those are not. There's no way a small community of people who make $1 a day and $2 a day can afford such system. How come we don't have? How come people don't make money in creating a water filtration system that are good for 8 billion people? Right? Something about electricity, something about food distribution. We have plenty of food on our planet. We have plenty of water on our planet. Yeah. I think the problem is water management. That sucks.
Absolutely.
Food management, that is not good.
Right.
Energy management, that is not good. It's the management part. It has nothing to do with the resources themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, so, absolutely. A side note on this and data point that I find to be really impactful, that of the food we grow each year, we waste a third.
Yeah.
And the carbon emissions from that food decomposing, often in landfill situations, is enough that if it were a nation state, it would be the third most emitting country in the world, greenhouse gas emissions, just following China and the United States. So we have plenty of food.
We have
50% more food than people are eating currently.
You mentioned 1/3, but I read 40%.
Yeah, maybe it's up to 40.
There was a sign at Sea Boulder that 40% of the food that we get is wasted, right?
Yeah.
Water, same thing. How much water is wasted because pipes are leaking everywhere, right? That makes absolutely no sense. You mentioned, greenhouse gas emissions because of that wasted food. Yeah, makes absolutely no sense. But it has to do with the management of the resources, not the resources themselves. Like the technology, I can bring a nice pen. That pen can hurt somebody, or you can write a beautiful poem about it. That's nothing to do with the pen in itself, right? I think that we are right now with the folks at Peace Tech Lab. My colleague Sheldon has developed an interesting collaboration with folks at Oxford, this idea of misinformation. In fact, they are planning to create you heard of the IPCC for climate change. They are developing, essentially with funding from several foundations, the equivalent to IPCC on misinformation.
Yeah, fascinating.
Right? Because misinformation, disinformation, bad faith information kills people.
Absolutely.
It's actually very dangerous.
Yeah.
There's nothing, again, like technology, information in itself is fine if you use it wisely.
Yeah.
Right? And then so misinformation was looking at AI a few days ago, ChatGPT. You can have you ask the questions, and that the computer essentially answers essentially everything you need to know. The question is what you read is true or not? I mean, someone could control that package of information and misuse it completely.
Yeah.
And you should, if you have tried ChatGPT, studied it was released in November of 2022.
Yeah.
Write a book. In fact, I just finished my book there. What is the first draft of it? And I bumped into ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And well, I can ask ChatGPT, write a book about, I don't know, the one I'm working on is climate security, peace, and sustainability. It's going to write something. 1.0 introduction, 2.0 and so on. It writes just table, you can do it, a table of content. You can ask, write a book on permaculture.
Yeah.
And that AI will write a book. It may not be true, whatever it says, but just a matter of time when AI essentially is going to be more intelligent than human beings for two reasons. Number one, AI increases in capacity, and human beings are essentially getting dumber and dumber. So that singular point, they call that a singular point, is going to happen sooner than later because of the dumbification of humans. Imagine students now can go to AI and say, okay, I have a paper that is due tomorrow. Write a paper on permaculture. Boom. You turn it in, and they get a good grade. Have they learned anything? No. But, so the academic world will have to change.
Yeah.
What we are seeing today is going to make some big changes in how we are educating young people and how we make decisions in the world.
Yeah.
But again, going back to our discussion earlier, how do you bring wisdom in there?
Yeah. Well, speaking of AI, I'll take this opportunity to remind our audience, this is the Why on Earth Community Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron William Perry, and today we're visiting with Bernard Amadei, the founder of Engineers Without Borders. And of course, AI is a thread, a theme that I deal with in my new novel, Veriditas, which is a term coined by the mystic Hildegard von Bingen that Bernard mentioned earlier. And in the arc of the story, there's this emerging wisdom that takes us from the AI of artificial intelligence to the AI of authentic intelligence that comes to us through the ages from the esoteric traditions, the traditions and teachings of various luminaries and of indigenous cultures and wisdom. Bernard has a copy here of Veriditas.
And I'm reading it, by the way, Aaron, and as I mentioned to you before, I don't want it to end because I would be sad the day when I reach the last page, which is page, I don't know, somewhere. 500 something.
It's a page turner.
542. It's a great page turner, but there's so much information in there.
Yeah.
I do believe Aaron is a Renaissance man, and they are very rare when you meet Renaissance people, men and women, of course, on this planet. And I can count about maybe a handful of people like him who are exploring new ways of thinking, and essentially deeply rooted in wisdom tradition. And that, to me, wisdom tradition from the West and wisdom tradition from indigenous cultures as well. So if you have not, it sounds like a commercial, but if you have not read this book, you may want to read it because it's a great page turner. I read it before going to sleep. It doesn't put me to sleep, but it's a great way of relaxing and finishing the day.
That's wonderful, yeah. And if you would like to get a copy of the book, we have them in print form as well as ebook digital form. You can go to veriditasbook.com. It's VIRIDITAS book.com. And of course, I want to take the opportunity as we're discussing, we could say this episode's brought to you by Veriditas today. I want to be sure to thank our supporters, our ambassadors, our monthly contributors. We have many folks giving on a monthly basis to the Why on Earth community to make this podcast series possible, as well as the other outreach work, gatherings, and resources that we provide to the communities around the world. If you haven't yet joined our giving program and you would like to, you can go to whyonearth.org and click on the donate button and set it up for any amount. If you'd like to give at the $33 a month level or greater, we will be happy to ship you a jar of the Waylay Waters biodynamically and regeneratively grown hemp-infused aromatherapy salts that are wonderful as a thank you gift. So check that out, set that up. Again, thanks to everybody for your support who are already part of the program. And Bernard, I gotta say that right now the Y on Earth community is working on our 5-year strategic vision, and we see there are several things we can do in collaboration with many other organizations out there to have even more positive impact in the world. And with that as a mention, I want to ask, what are you foreseeing as you kind of quote unquote grow up here with your upcoming graduation? I guess it's a retirement from 40 years of being a professor, and hopefully we can plant the seeds of us doing more collaboration in the coming months and years.
Maybe we can write a book together, but writing a book takes a lot of effort, as you know.
Yeah.
But I think that what I'm looking for more is getting involved in some projects and learn. Learn from the native traditions.
Yeah.
To me, that it's not sentimentalism. Of course, native traditions had their own problems as well. But what can we learn? What do we learn about sustainability? Right?
Yeah.
Today, there are two places, in my opinion: learning from the native traditions and learning from nature. And the whole field of biomimicry. We were talking about it before. What can we learn from nature? Nature is the 4.6 billion years experiment in sustainability. If it's not sustainable by now, then we might as well, quit. So what can we learn from nature? And that requires humility, that requires wisdom, that requires saying, I don't understand, teach me, tell me. It requires sitting down and being silent and being quiet. It also requires being able to listen, which, in my opinion, is a big problem in our society today. To be able to listen and live in humility. It doesn't mean living in a cave, but understanding that, we can do well by doing good. We want to change the world, as Mahatma Gandhi talks about. And you want to change the world, you need to be the change that you want to see in the world. Right? And what is that? And I think that, the answer to that question is different for you and me, right? But we're all contributing to something good.
Yeah.
Right? So you have 8 billion people on our planet, but ultimately it's taking that homework assignment. What is the gift that you only bring to the world?
Yeah.
And sitting down, I think that I urge all your people listening to this to go to a coffee place or tea place and say, okay, what's my mission statement? You can change it as many times as you want. But we all have a mission statement. What's your mission statement? What is the gift that you only can give to the world? And the best, one time I was in Kathmandu and I was in front of a Buddhist monk and I asked him, what's the meaning of life? And he told me, chocolate. Chocolate, what the heck? And what he did, he went to Siri and asked that question on the phone.
Holy wow.
And sure enough, I did that one time. After asking that same question 10 times, I got chocolate too.
Oh my goodness.
Now, but what's the meaning of life? I think the best answer to that is to find your gift.
Yeah.
And what's the purpose of life is to share that gift. And that to me, I'm very content with those definitions. To find your gift and to share it with others.
Yeah. Amen and aho to that.
Aho to that.
Yeah. Well, Bernard, thank you so much. We're going to, of course, take a few minutes to record our behind the scenes segment that is available to our ambassadors and our global advisory board. So if you're interested in becoming an ambassador, again, you can go to whyonearth.org and engage with us there. And so, before we sign off from our main podcast episode, Bernard, and let's write something together. And when you're...
But let's do something together.
Let's do something more together. Absolutely.
Writing is easy. Doing is more difficult.
Absolutely. And when your forthcoming book, Climate Security, Peace, and Sustainability, comes out, it'd be wonderful to podcast again on that. But we've got a lot to do, Bernard, and I'm looking forward to exploring ways we can collaborate both in action and in writing. And before we sign off, I want to invite you, if there's anything else you'd like to add and share with our audience, and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us.
This one I want to go back to Aaron's book. In there, you meet some very interesting people. And if you ask Aaron if those people are real or not, he will answer, yes, some are real. And I'm glad they are real because I want to meet them. And some, obviously, it's a fiction book created, in his brain. But read that book and let us know what you think of it. Plus, he gives you the latitude and longitude of all the places he has visited. So nothing prevents you on weekends when you're looking for something to do to go to those sites and meet the interesting people he's talking about.
That's right.
I really like that. It's not just fiction, it's practical fiction.
Yeah,
put it that way.
It's a new genre. Yeah, there are a lot of nuggets and treasures there for folks to discover.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you for writing that book.
Yeah, my pleasure, Bernard.
And someone has a lot of money, he has to make a movie out of it.
Yeah.
I think a great movie can be made out of this book. Maybe a 3-part series or 4-part series of Viriditas. I did not know that Viriditas was from Hildegard of Bingen.
Yeah, it's a term she created, a Latin-inspired term that means the green healing energy of the divine that flows through plants.
Yeah, that's Pargerics of alchemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's and Hildegard of Bingen was practicing of a group of Beguines, women who decided they could not join the church because they could not be ordained, but they created their own group of women. I think you see them in Belgium, you see them in Germany, in Bruges. If you ever go to Bruges, there's a hermitage there where all the women decided to live an austere type of life and with humility and so on. But they were not ordained by the Catholic Church. So something to explore.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know she also corresponded and was friends with Bernard de Clairvaux, who was one of the founders of Knights Templar.
That's right.
So very interesting history there, very interesting person, Hildegard von Bingen.
And again, this idea of finding energy through plants and finding wisdom, again, this ties well with this idea of original blessing.
Yeah.
It's positive.
Yeah.
It's awe. It's beauty. It's rediscovering the sacred through everything you touch, see, hear every day.
So beautiful. And as is said in the Hopi Elder Speaks, may everything we do now be done in a manner of sacred ceremony.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Bernard, for this wonderful conversation and for all that you're doing and have done for our world.
Oh, you do too, and we all do our part today, right?
Yes, absolutely. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Why on Earth Community Stewardship and Sustainability podcast series is hosted by Aaron William Perry, author, thought leader, and executive consultant. The podcast and video recordings are made possible by the generous support of people like you. To sign up as a daily, weekly, or monthly supporter, please visit whyonearth.org/support. Support packages start at just $1 per month. The podcast series is also sponsored by several corporate and organization sponsors. You can get discounts on their products and services using the code WHYONEARTH, all one word with a Y. These sponsors are listed on the whyonearth.org/support page. If you found this particular podcast episode especially insightful, informative, or inspiring, please pass it on and share it with a friend whom you think will also enjoy it. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. And thank you for being a part of the Y on Earth community.